Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. Wisconsin, Redstone Military Base. Gray clouds hung in the sky, heralding imminent rain, but it didn't stop those who were ready to risk for the future. High above the ground, in the belly of a transport plane, people in black jumpsuits lined up, their helmets securely fastened. Among them stood Nicholas "Nick" Graves, an instructor for the elite combat jumping unit. "Check altitude." His voice echoed through the noise of the engines. The young fighters nervously glanced at each other. For some, this was their first jump, and their fingers tightly gripped the carabiners of their parachutes. Nick had seen this 1,000 times. He knew who would clench their teeth and jump, and who would hesitate. One of the rookies, Grayson, 25 years old, best in theory, but clearly not in his element in the air, turned to him. "Sir, what if the chute doesn't open?" he asked, looking at the darkening horizon. Nick smirked, stepping closer, so their helmets almost touched. "Then you'll have 30 seconds to get religious." The fighters around them laughed, but Grayson just swallowed. "Don't sweat it, son. The chute will open. Just don't think, just jump." The pilot signaled. 2 minutes to drop. Nick tightened the straps on his chest and took a deep breath. "Listen up. Exit is tough. Air currents are wild, but if you don't start flailing your arms around, you'll stay alive. Don't spin in the air. Keep a stable position. If someone loses control, remember what you were taught. And lastly, this jump will be one you'll remember for the rest of your life. So, don't screw it up." The final countdown blared through the speaker. 5, 4, 3, 2. Nick was the first to step into the void. The air hit his face. The ground rushed up to meet him, and the screams of adrenaline echoed behind him. This was his world, his element, his life. Chapter 1. Fall and rise above Wisconsin. Free falling is a unique form of silence. Below, the world rages, the wind roars, but inside you, there's only calm. Nicholas "Nick" Graves had long been accustomed to this sensation. While others panicked and jerkily pulled at the straps, he felt as calm as if he were sitting by the fireplace with a glass of whiskey. At 5,000 feet, he allowed himself a moment to observe the fighters. Some maintained form, others spiraled, but overall it was not bad. His task was to teach them to fall correctly. "Grayson, straighten your back. You're not a paper bag in a storm." He barked into the microphone. "Yes, sir." Grayson nervously nodded and spread his arms, but it didn't help. "Stop fighting the wind. Trust it." A few seconds later, the guy stabilized. Not bad. At 3,000 feet, the fighters began to deploy their parachutes. Nick did the same, gently slowing his descent. A few minutes later, everyone had landed. Nick's boots touched the ground first. He quickly gathered the straps, looked around. Everyone was alive, no one tangled in their own canopy. A good day. After the jumps, Nick entered the hangar where the instructors always gathered. The smell of coffee, oil, and metal. In one corner, someone checked the gear, and in another, laughter rang out. Someone had a particularly embarrassing landing that day. "Well, Graves, how are the kids?" A voice came from behind him. Nick turned around. It was Caleb K. Randall, a former Ranger, now a tactics instructor. "Alive. For now." Grayson dived again like a dead fish. "Spot on. But seems he's getting that it's better to befriend the wind than fight it." Kay smirked and handed Nick a bottle of water. "Tell me, Nick, how do you manage all these years without a family?" Graves put the bottle on the table, not in a hurry to answer. "Where are you getting at?" "Just. You're always here at the base on missions. I came home yesterday, kids, wife." Her eyes sparkled, and I realized this is what it's all about. "Are you envious? Or is it the other way around?" Kay chuckled. "No, just can't understand how you can live alone for so long." Nick paused, his gaze lingering on the steel table. "I wasn't always alone." Kay frowned. "You know, I never pry, but you're not always at work for no reason, right?" Nick abruptly stood up, as if the topic was exhausted. "All right, Kay, enough with the family mush. What's next?" "Tactical training next week. How about we hit a bar after work for once?" "Maybe." But Kay knew Nick never came. No one waited for him at home. The air was heavy, saturated with the moisture of storm clouds, but Nicholas "Nick" Graves paid no heed. He felt only the swift fall, the air beating against his chest, and the deafening silence that always came in the first seconds of the jump. Below stretched endless land, crisscrossed by thin threads of roads and forests. For a moment, Nick closed his eyes, savoring the moment, then opened them and checked the position of the fighters. Grayson started spinning. "Damn," Nick muttered, directing his body downward to catch up with him. Grayson flailed his arms desperately, his legs dangling in the air, and panic completely overtook his mind. "Keep your axis, damn it," Nick barked, swooping into the stream beside him. But Grayson didn't hear. The guy's face was distorted with fear, his lips quivered, and his fingers clutched the strap as if it could save him. Nick reached out, grabbed him by the belt, and pulled him down, stabilizing his fall. "Breathe," he shouted. Grayson looked at him with wide eyes. His breathing was erratic, but he slowly composed himself. The altimeter on his wrist flashed red. "Parachute. Now." Grayson obediently pulled the ring, and a second later he was jerked upwards as the canopy deployed perfectly. Nick did the same. The wind sharply slowed his movement, and now he calmly soared above the ground, watching as the fighters landed one by one on the training field. Grayson landed hard, but successfully. Nick landed nearby, approached him, and offered his hand. "Now do you understand why I said not to wave your arms?" Grayson was still breathing heavily, but managed a weak smile. "Yes, sir. It won't happen again." Nick patted him on the shoulder. "Good. Now get your canopy off and head to the barracks. We'll discuss your mistakes this evening." The young man nodded, and Nick surveyed the field. All the fighters were accounted for. A good day. 2 hours later, Nick sat in the hangars where the instructors were discussing the training. The air was permeated with the smell of oil, coffee, and metal. "Well, Graves, how are the kids?" A voice came from behind him. Nick turned around. It was Kay Randall, his old friend, a former ranger. "Alive. For now." Kay laughed, sitting down next to him. "Did Grayson try to spin into a tailspin again?" "How did you guess?" "Because they all do. I used to fly like a dead bird too." Kay reached for a bottle of water. "Listen, Nick, how do you manage all these years without a family?" Nick put the bottle on the table, thoughtfully spinning it in his hands. "What are you getting at?" "Just can't understand how you can live alone. I came home yesterday, and there were my wife, kids, and I realize this is what it's all about." Nick looked at him, squinting. "Are you envious of me or the other way around?" Kay chuckled. "No, just can't understand why you're always here at the base on missions." Nick paused for a moment, his gaze lingering on the steel table. "I wasn't always alone." Kay frowned. "You know, I never pry, but you're not just clinging to work for no reason, right?" Nick slowly stood up as if the topic was exhausted. "Let's talk about what training we have next week instead." Kay sighed, but didn't insist. "Tactical maneuvers. But can you come to the bar after work just once?" Nick smiled. "Maybe." But Kay knew he wouldn't come, because something else awaited him. A few months later, Nick retired from the Army and moved to South Carolina. He bought a plot of land by a lake, built a dock, stocked the pond, and named the place Silver Lake. Now he lived a different life. Every morning he got up at dawn, walked around his property, greeted clients, checked the gear and boats. It was a new rhythm, not like before, but still stable. The children had grown up and moved away. Ethan, 24, worked in Boston, started a cybersecurity startup. Sometimes he came just to sit by the water. Sophie, 21, studied medicine in New York. She was closer to her mother, but Nick still felt she hadn't forgotten about him. He was proud of them. But Anna, she had changed. She used to greet him with a smile, told him about everything that happened during the day. Now she stayed out late, spoke little. Her phone was always on silent mode. Nick noticed this, but he kept silent, because if you open the door to doubts, there's no going back. Anna slowly sipped wine, looking at the lake. Her phone lay face down, but Nick saw her fingers nervously slide around the edge of the glass. "Are you leaving this weekend?" Anna flinched, as if she hadn't expected the question. "What?" "Oh, yes. A corporate law seminar in Atlanta." Nick nodded. "Again?" "Yes. Work demands it." She looked up. Irritation. "Nick, you've always known my career is important. Is that a problem?" He looked straight into her eyes. "No, just noticed." Anna took a sip of wine. She no longer asked how his day went. She no longer asked about the kids. She used to ask. Nick watched her, the water, the sunset. He didn't know that very soon, all this life would collapse. That this trip to Atlanta would be the point of no return. South Carolina, private estate Silver Lake. Evening. The quiet splash of water, the rustling of trees, the dull chirping of crickets. Nicholas Graves knew this soundtrack by heart. He considered it his own. Over the years, this silence had become his refuge, his routine, his new reality. But today something was off. Anna sat opposite in the dim light of the terrace, her face hidden in shadow. The table between them, white wine, an untouched dinner, her phone screen down. "Are you leaving this weekend?" She paused for a second, barely perceptible, but Nick noticed. "Yes, a seminar in Atlanta." Again, her gaze rose, cold, irritated. "Nick, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a housewife. I have a career. Is that a problem?" He said nothing, just watched. Anna no longer asked how his day had gone. Anna no longer asked about the kids. She used to ask. He stubbed out his cigarette and stood up. "He'll take a walk." He needed to clear his head of this feeling. But 10 minutes later, he received a call. A call that changed everything. The number was hidden. Nick frowned but answered. Heavy breathing. A pause. Then a low, unfamiliar voice. "Today your life ends. Open your eyes." The line went dead. Nick froze, holding the phone in his hand. Adrenaline surged, but not fear. "Open your eyes." He slowly looked up at the house. Anna was inside. Everything as usual. Or was it? He dialed her number. A muffled ringtone sounded from the living room. The phone was in the house. But a minute ago, when they were sitting at the table, it had been beside her. Anna had left the table without her phone. Nick scanned his brain for every detail. When could she have left it? Why? He opened the tracking app. Anna Graves, last location, 17 miles from home. The underground bunker of the Black Lotus Club. An hour later, Nick was in the city center. The location where Anna's phone was found turned out to be the elite nightclub Black Lotus. Outside, nothing remarkable. A typical building made of glass and concrete. Security at the entrance. Loud music, pulsating lights. But Nick knew that the real things were hidden underground. He got out of the car, surveyed the perimeter. Ordinary visitors went inside, chatting noisily, but there were people at the entrance who definitely were not just security. Posture, gaze, hidden headsets. This was not just a club. Nick walked along the building, studying exits, cameras, possible entry points. "Open your eyes." He remembered the voice from the phone. He put on a dark jacket, lowered his head, and headed to the back entrance. As a security guard, 5 minutes later, he stood in a narrow corridor leading to the basement floor. Nick paused, looking around. Ahead, a heavy metal door. Behind it, what he would have to see. He stepped forward and pushed the door. What would he see there? Nick moved forward, blending into the shadows, merging with the throbbing rhythm of the nightclub. People, music, alcohol. All were just background noise, which he filtered out, focusing only on the goal. Anna. She stood at a round table in the center of the room, opposite a tall man in an expensive suit. Spotlight tore his face from the semi-darkness. Roman Walter. Nick didn't know him personally, but he didn't need to. He had seen this type hundreds of times. A predator accustomed to taking whatever he wished. Anna nervously ran her hand through her hair, then picked up a pen. In front of her lay a document. A contract. Roman smiled, watching her. His fingers casually touched her wrist. She didn't pull away. "Sign it, dear. You know you want this." Anna swallowed. Her gaze faltered. "Roman, shush. No nonsense, dear." The pen trembled in her hand, but a second later, it made a mark, sealing the deal. Nick clenched his fists. Every fiber in his being demanded that he burst in there and smash the bastard's head against that very table. But he didn't move, because if you want to destroy an enemy, you first have to understand who you're dealing with. Anna put down the pen, leaned back. Her eyes were empty, as if she had already given up. Roman smiled. "That's it. Good girl. Now let's go." He touched her lower back, leading her toward a corridor. Nick followed, maintaining distance. The corridor led deeper into the club, beyond red curtains, where the sound of music became muffled. Private rooms. Anna entered first. Roman followed her, closing the door. Nick approached, leaned against the wall, controlling his breathing. Inside, it was quiet. Then, Roman's voice. "What an idiot your husband is." Nick froze. "Today he lost you. Tomorrow, his daughter will be delivered to me. And soon his money will be in my portfolio, and he himself will be buried in the ground." Not enviable. Nick's heart thudded dully. But now, Roman continued, his voice carrying a lazy taunt. "Do something nice for your master." A click. The zipper of a dress. Anna flinched. Nick listened no more. His hand slipped to his holster, drawing a pistol with a silencer. A muffled shot. The door lock shattered into pieces. With a thrust, he kicked in the door and stepped into the room. Roman turned around but did not flinch. He just smiled. Anna froze by the mirror, her eyes widening. Nick raised the pistol, aiming at Walter. "What kind of madman's plan are you spouting here, you bastard?" Roman smiled, slowly approached the table, showing neither fear nor hurry. "It's not madness. It's almost reality." He picked up papers from the table, unfolded them, and handed them to Nicholas. "Look, now I own your wife." Nick grabbed the contract, his eyes quickly scanning the lines. Madness? No, much worse. A legally impeccable contract. It stated that Anna transferred all rights to her property, body, and future disposition to Roman Walter. "Today your wife sold herself to me." Roman's voice was smooth, lazy, savoring the moment. "She now unconditionally obeys me." Nick silently crumpled the paper in his fist. "For what?" he whispered. Roman smirked. "For my considerable assets. For the masculine strength you couldn't give her in marriage." Nick stepped forward, but Roman did not move, just raised a finger. "Wait, it's not over yet." He leaned forward, his smile broadening. "When your daughter is delivered to me." Nick felt everything inside him explode. "I will make her sign this contract with the devil too." Something snapped inside, and you'll learn about the second part of the plan a bit later. Roman, without taking his eyes off, pressed the security call button. Nick gripped the handle of the pistol. Time slowed down. 2 armed guards burst through the door. Roman took a step back. "Perhaps you'll stay for this show, Nicholas. I want you to see your life crumble." And Nick realized he had no more choices. Anna frantically stepped to the side, her lips trembling as if she was about to say something, but at that moment Roman lazily raised his hand, not even looking at her. Silence. Anna froze, her eyes darting to Nick, filled with fear, but she didn't utter a word. Roman smiled again. "Did your master allow you to speak?" His voice was soft, almost tender, but there was something icy, frightening in its tone. Anna clenched her fists, but made no further attempt to speak. Nick slowly shifted his gaze from her to Walter. He clenched his fists. "Before you approach my family, you should have studied my past well." Roman smirked, but his eyes narrowed. "Who do you think you're facing, bastard?" Nick's voice was even, but there was something in it that seemed to make even the walls grow colder. "And believe me, it will be you who ends up in the ground. If not today, then no later than in 3 days." He took a step forward, still holding the weapon. "And your close ones will feign tears at your grave, rejoicing that you are dead." The smile didn't leave Roman's face, but something in his gaze faltered. And at that moment, the door behind Nick was blown off its hinges. Heavies burst into the room. 2 of them, both in suits, but they moved like professional killers. The first lunged forward, aiming directly at Nick's temple, but he dived down, dodging the blow, and at the same moment his elbow broke the attacker's ribs. A crunch. The man staggered but didn't fall. The second was already close. Nick heard movement behind him, turned around, took the blow with his arm but was sharply twisted down, his wrist being twisted. The pistol slipped from his fingers. They knew what they were doing. The first had recovered, kicked, but Nick caught his ankle and yanked upward. The man fell, his head striking a glass table. 1 down, but the second, strong, powerful, experienced in combat. Nick grabbed his wrist, twisted, trying to throw him off balance, but the man used the force of inertia, and the next moment Nick was hurled backward, crashing into the wall. His vision darkened. "You're good, old man, but we're better." Nick saw the man pull out a knuckle duster, the steel gleam flashing in the dim light. "Bad, But he wasn't ready to die here. He rose, pretended to stagger, letting the enemy approach. And he struck, not in the face, in the throat. The heavy choked, grabbed his neck, stumbled, but even in such a condition managed to land a blow. The knuckle duster split his cheek. Nick felt something warm flow down his face. But he now controlled the situation. Left hook, right uppercut, knee to the stomach. The heavy doubled over. Nick swung and delivered the final blow to the temple. The man collapsed, motionless. Nick, breathing heavily, wiped the blood from his face. Picked up the pistol, turned to Walter. Roman was no longer smiling. Now he saw before him not just the husband of his new toy. Now he saw who Nick Graves really was. Well, Roman, where's your bravado now? Walter slowly raised his hands, but there was no fear in his eyes. He looked at Nick and seemed to be plotting something. At that moment, Anna screamed. Nick jerked toward her, but at the same moment, something sharply hit him in the neck. Darkness. He felt his body fall. The last thing he heard was Roman's voice, filled with triumphant glee. Good morning, Nick. When you wake up, you definitely won't like where you'll find yourself. Darkness swallowed him completely. Nick woke up to the smell of damp and rot. His eyes didn't focus immediately, but the first thing he saw were the concrete walls, streaked with dark flows. There were no windows in the room, just a solitary lamp hanging on a long wire, swaying with the movement of the air. His hands were tied behind his back. The metal chair under him creaked as he slightly moved, checking how tightly he was secured. Damn, very tight. He took a deep breath, forcing his heart to beat more steadily. Panic was the worst ally. Then he heard footsteps. Nick slowly raised his head. Anna. She stood in front of him, a few steps away, her face partially hidden in the shadow. No emotion. You were just a pawn in all this, Nick. Her voice was even cold. He slowly smirked. Is that so? A pawn? She said nothing. And what were you, Anna? A queen? A rook? Or just a piece that your new master moves wherever he pleases? She pursed her lips. You don't understand. Oh dear. He threw his head back and laughed loudly. The laugh echoed eerily in the room, like the echo of a dead man. Anna flinched. Nick abruptly leaned forward, his voice low, almost intimate. You know we'll get out of here, right? She didn't respond. Run. She blinked. What? Run to your master. Tell him I'm awake. Tell him he has just a few hours before I turn his world into a blazing hell. Anna clenched her fists but turned and walked away quickly. As soon as the door slammed shut behind her, Nick got to work. He surveyed the room. Thick concrete walls. No windows. A camera. A table with tools in the corner. Unpleasant. A ventilation grate on the ceiling. He took a deep breath, checking how tightly the ropes were tied. His wrists burned, but the knots were sloppily tied. These fools thought he was just a former soldier. They didn't know who they had put in this room. Nick started working his wrists, driving the joints into the gap between the ropes, stretching them until the pain became unbearable. Click. The first loop loosened. Click. The second. Another moment, and he pulled the ropes off his hands. Now, to escape. He looked up at the ventilation, jumping on a chair, too loud. But there was a rusty pipe on the wall. He grabbed it, pulled himself up, his toes hooking onto the wall, and with a sharp movement, he ripped off the ventilation grate. The metal crunched, but it gave way. Nick squeezed into the narrow passage. The air was stale, but it was a way out. Now only forward. He crawled, slowly, silently. The ventilation was old, flaking with rust. He heard voices below. He moved a few more meters, peeked through a grate below. A security room. For men. Armed. Not an option. He moved on. A few minutes passed, but then he felt fresh air. An exit. The metal again creaked as he pushed the grate aside. He tumbled out into a dark corridor. Distant music thumped. He was in one of the back areas of the club. He stood up. Freedom. But not quite. Now he was a target. Nick realized that no matter how tough he was, 1 against 10 wouldn't last. He needed a weapon. He needed to hide. But first, he needed to understand the game this bastard was playing. He moved forward, but then, what do you mean he escaped? The voice echoed through the building, filled with fury and malice. Roman, you idiots. Find him. Find him now. Nick smirked. Now the hunter had become the prey. Nick moved quickly, silently. He heard the echoing steps of the guards, spreading through the corridors of the underground complex. Now he was the prey, but not the kind that runs away in fear. He reached a side exit, the door leading to a narrow passage cluttered with boxes and trash. Nick knew he had seconds before the real hunt began. He paused, took a deep breath. Focus. The door burst open. The first two burst into the corridor. The first one Nick met with an elbow to the temple. The man fell, not even realizing what had happened. The second managed to draw a gun, but Nick was already there. He struck with the edge of his hand at the wrist, knocking the weapon away, then a knee to the stomach, and as the man doubled over, a swift motion broke his neck. 2 down. But in the distance, shouts were already sounding. Nick stripped one of them of his jacket, pulled it on, blending into the darkness. Time to leave. He dashed out into the night city. The hunt had begun. The city was teeming with life. Cars, glowing signs, clubs, street vendors. All could have been his shelter, but now it was a labyrinth where he could die. The first hunters appeared within a minute. 4 of them. They were not just ordinary guards. Predators. Their eyes scanned the crowd, their movements precise, cold. Mercenaries. Roman had spared no expense. Now he wanted not just humiliation, he wanted blood. Rooftop chase. Nick turned into an alley. Behind him, shouts rang out. He's here. A shot. A bullet embedded in the wall next to his head. He darted forward, sprinted, and leapt up, grabbing onto a fire escape ladder. His feet left the ground. A second shot, right into the metal of the ladder. Loud clang. Nick climbed faster, already hearing them also ascending. No choice. He burst onto the roof, sped past ventilation pipes, jumped to the neighboring building, landing on gravel. Pain in his legs, but he rolled forward, got up. Footsteps behind him. The chase was relentless. He sped up, leapt across a gap. Damn it. Landing, his hands scraping concrete, but he didn't fall. Behind, the mercenaries jumped after him. You won't get away, Graves. Nick plunged down, knocking over garbage bins, carving a path through balconies. He jumped down, right into a narrow alley, bursting into a market. Crowds of people, bright lights, smells of spices, street food. Grab him. Shots. People screamed, scattered. Nick grabbed a crate of fruits, threw it backward. Crash. One of the pursuers fell, but the others were already close. Gunfire. Bullets shattered wooden stalls, products scattered. Nick grabbed a metal pot, threw it at one of the mercenaries' heads. Kill him. He dove around a corner, grabbed a phone. Kay, I need you, damn it. The voice on the other end sounded alarmed. Nick, where are you? In hell, fuck. I got a whole squad on my tail. Hold on. I see your marker. You need to get to the bridge. That's 5 blocks away. Damn it. Then move faster. They'll be there in 3 minutes. Explosions and rescue. Nick burst onto the street, smashed a car window, and grabbed the driver. Out. The driver, without questioning, tumbled out. Nick hit the gas. The car roared. Motorcycles behind him. He's getting away. One of the mercenaries pulled out a rocket launcher. Nick sharply turned the wheel. The car skidded. The projectile exploded in a store window. Deafening boom. The bridge ahead. He heard the roar of a helicopter. Nick, jump. Are you kidding me? Jump, damn it. He floored the accelerator, speeding up the car. At the last moment, as the bridge ended, he kicked out the door and tumbled out. Free fall. Cold air against his face. And a hard landing on something metallic. Hands grabbed his shoulders. Kay, old man, you're just indestructible. The helicopter rose, leaving a furious Roman below. Find him. Find him now, you bastards. Nick smirked. Now the hunt begins. Nick sat in the cramped cabin of the helicopter, looking down at the receding city. He held a bottle of water, but hardly drank. Kay, holding the controls with one hand, threw him a brief glance. Going to tell me what the hell is going on? Nick didn't answer right away. His thoughts were elsewhere. Roman Walter. This bastard wasn't just a brash businessman who took his wife. This wasn't about infidelity. This was about power. Kay, I need you to check something for me. Shoot. Roman Walter. I need all his accounts, companies, partners, even the license plates of cars he owns. Kay whistled, but his eyes showed he wasn't much surprised. Something tells me this guy isn't just a nightclub owner. You have no idea. Kay reached for the control panel, activated an encrypted communication channel. Lena, we need an urgent digital x-ray on one bastard. The voice in the speaker was female, slightly weary. Give me a name. Roman Walter. Everything you can find. There was a pause on the other end. Damn, this guy is in the big leagues. Details. You're not going to like it. I already don't. Get to the point. Lena clicked something in her headset, the sound of her fingers skimming the keyboard audible. Formally, he owns a chain of nightclubs, is an investor, owns a couple of construction companies in Miami and Los Angeles, registered through offshore accounts. Standard dirty business? No, that's just the cover. Nick looked at Kay, who nodded. The information was worth noting. Go deeper, Lena. All right, hey, race what we have. Roman Walter is a member of the International Shadow Syndicate Mirror. Never heard of it. They don't show themselves, but they are everywhere. Political coups, human trafficking, money laundering, illegal financial operations through crypto, control over cartels. Kay whistled. A damn circus. Roman is one of the key figures. Not the leader, but someone trusted. He's the financier, managing the shadow streams of money, making dirty capitals look clean. Nick clenched his teeth. The picture was getting clearer. His wife didn't just leave for another man. She fell into the hands of someone who controlled a massive criminal network. And this person planned to take his daughter. Lena, listen carefully. I need his banking transactions, IP addresses, servers. Any point where he keeps his money. You seriously want to go to war with him? This is not a game. Lena exhaled. All right, give me a couple of hours. The connection ended. Kay shook his head. Nick, do you even realize what you've gotten into? I haven't gotten into it. And breaking his chain. A few hours later, Lena reconnected. I found something interesting. Talk. Walter channels money through 3 major conduits. 1. Cryptocurrency hubs in Hong Kong. 2. Shadow investments through brokers in London. 3. A dozen shell companies in South America that launder his dirty money as clean business. How can we hit them? First, the crypto. I found his wallets, but I don't think we can just pull out the money. If we can't steal it, can we freeze it? Yes, but it's going to be tough. Figured out. Second, the brokers. I've contacted a couple of people. They're ready to pass information to the regulators. Make it so the accounts start getting blocked one after another. And third, South America. That's simpler. A few fake raids by tax officials, a couple of calls to the right people, and his companies will collapse. Start it. Lena nodded, disconnecting. Nick looked at Kay. Now he'll start panicking. And what are you going to do? Nick slowly smiled. It'll wait for him to reach out. A day later, everything went according to plan. Accounts began to freeze. Money vanished. Roman darted between the offices of his consultants, but they only shrugged. Nick watched the surveillance camera feed sent to him. Roman rushed into one of the offices, threw his phone against the wall. What the fuck is happening? One of the underlings swallowed. It's a targeted strike. Someone knows how your network operates. Roman clenched his fists. Graves. Silence. That bastard. He took a deep breath, then suddenly punched the table. Find him. Find him and bring him to me. What do you want us to do with him? Roman wiped his lips and smirked. Oh, I have a few ideas. But first, he must suffer. Nick's phone rang. The number was hidden. He smiled. Roman took the bait. The night was dark, moonless, filled with a thick silence. Nick Graves stood on top of a hill, hidden among the trees. Below, nestled in luxury, sprawled the mansion of Roman Walter, a massive estate surrounded by a high concrete wall, filled with cameras and armed guards. They were holding his daughter there. Nick looked at the building, motionless, his breathing even, his heart icy. He had long since stopped feeling fear. Only pure, cold calculation. He knew it was a trap. Knew Roman was waiting for him here. But the problem was, Roman didn't know who he was waiting for. Nick pressed a finger to the microphone at his neck. "K, you on?" "Yes. Your signal is clear. Are you sure you want to go in alone?" "Sure. What about the electronics?" "You're in luck, brother. I found their servers. Cameras will go blind in 90 seconds. Perfect. But listen, Nick. Once you start, there's no going back. It already burned. Silence on the line. Then Kay's voice, calm as always. Go ahead. Nick took a deep breath, tensed his shoulders, and began the hunt. He moved quickly along the perimeter of the wall. The cameras were still operating. 2 minutes until the shutdown. At the first security post, 2 men stood guard. One smoked, the other lazily scrolled through his phone. They were not prepared. Nick slipped into the shadows, drawing closer. 4 seconds. The first hit, a punch to the throat. The guard gasped, hands clutching his throat. But within a moment, Nick drove a knife under his ribs. The second only had time to turn around. A shot from a silenced gun. The body fell into the grass. Nick took the access cards, radio, and weapon. Now he was inside. Cameras disabled. He crossed the inner courtyard, evading spotlights. 2 more security posts, 3 more dead. He moved like a ghost. The mansion was huge, but Nick had already studied its layout from the plans Kay had obtained. His daughter was held in the West Wing. But first, he had to unleash hell. He set 3 charges at key points. Only after that did he head inside. The corridors were lit with soft yellow light. Steps were muffled by carpets. Voices. Where is he, damn it? The boss said he would come, and we need to be ready. Did you see what he did to our guys at the club? We're screwed. Nick smirked. They were already afraid of him. He raised his gun and began methodically clearing the corridors. 2 shots, one to the chest, another to the head, without excess noise. Finally, he reached the West Wing. His heart beat a bit faster. A dark oak door. Behind it, his daughter. Nick placed his hand on the handle, took a breath, and pushed the door open. She was there, frightened, bound, but alive. Nick stepped forward. Sophie. Her eyes lit up with hope. But at that moment, a voice came from the speakers. At last, you are here, Graves. Roman. Nick quickly turned around. Cameras. He was being watched. Welcome to my home. Nick gripped his pistol. The game had just begun. As long as everything goes according to my plan, Graves. Roman's voice echoed from the speakers, spreading a cold chill along the walls. Nick stood in the center of the room, his daughter trembling, bound in the corner. He saw the camera on the ceiling, Roman's eye, watching every move. Thought you'd walk in here, kill a couple of my men, find a girl, and just leave? Walter laughed. You're an experienced soldier, Nick. You should know that I have calculated all your moves. Nick slowly holstered his pistol. Know what your mistake is, Roman? A pause in the speakers. What then? Nick slowly surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on the camera. You think you still control the situation. Somewhere outside, a dull explosion sounded. The first scare. What the? Roman's voice was no longer confident. Nick allowed himself a slight smirk. I promised you something, bastard. He took a step forward. Promised that you would be the one in the ground, not me. A seconde explosion. This time it was closer. So, it's time to start executing my plan. The roar of helicopter blades cut through the night sky. A helicopter landed right in the mansion's courtyard. Interference hissed in the speakers. What the hell did you do? Now Walter's voice trembled. Did you think I would come here alone? Nick heard something crash on the second floor. His people had entered. Now Walter was the cornered animal. Nick approached his daughter, cut the ropes. Dad, all good. You'll be safe soon. But then Nick heard footsteps. He turned around, raising his pistol. Roman was running. Nick fired. The bullet missed by millimeters, shattering a mirror. Walter turned down a corridor, flailing like a rat in a maze. Nick pursued. Suddenly something, or someone, slammed into his back. No, someone. His vision blurred with pain. Fingers clamped over his eyes, pressing them inward. Anna, crazy, defending her master. You wouldn't dare. She shrieked, breathing raggedly into his ear. Nick howled in pain, tried to shake her off. She scratched, bit, pounded with her fists. Mel, cops, becoming another man's weapon. Nick slammed back against a wall, knocking her down. She moaned, but was already trying to rise. Meanwhile, Roman continued to run. Nick wiped the blood from his face, his vision swimming. He took a deep breath. You chose a side, Anna. Now die with it. He struck her so hard she lost consciousness. At that moment, gunfire erupted below. Roman was trying to escape, but Nick was already on his trail. And this was the end. Roman ran. His legs slipped on the marble floor, His shoulders slammed into a wall, but he didn't stop. The noise of gunfire echoed from the hall, the sounds of his men's heavy steps dying one by one. He knew it was the end. Just 5 minutes earlier, he had been the master of life, controlled everything, played with people's fates. Now he was the hunted animal. He dashed into a corridor, plunged down the stairs, trying to remember where that damn emergency exit was. Footsteps approached behind him. Slow, steady, not running, walking. Roman gasped for air. He knew who it was. He turned a corner, yanked a door, and froze. It wasn't the street, not a path to freedom, but a black, fetid patch of ground behind the mansion. A voice sounded behind him. So, Walter? Still going according to your plan? Roman spun around. Nick Graves stood in the shadow of the doorway. Blood on his hands. Clothes torn, but standing. Roman trembled. Listen, let's make a deal. Nick slowly approached. Seriously? Roman choked on his fear. All the money, the mansion, all my property, it's yours. They'll transfer everything. Just don't do this. Nick mockingly nodded. You know what's funny? Roman swallowed. I could just shoot you. He slowly drew his pistol. Roman fell to his knees. No. But that would be too easy, right? A gunshot. The bullet struck his knee. Roman screamed, collapsing onto his side. Nick leaned down, grabbed him by the hair, and dragged him to a pre-dug pit. Roman gasped from pain, his body shaking. You're insane. Nick let go, and he fell into the mud. A shovel lay nearby. Roman looked up at him with frightened eyes. What? Nick grabbed his hand and slowly pushed his fingers into the mud. I said dig, bastard. Roman flinched. You can't. You're not like this. Nick leaned in closer. They'll make you eat dirt, and they'll bury you alive here. Roman sobbed. They'll transfer everything. Everything. Just leave me, Nick, and my guys will make sure you don't get out. Nick straightened up, hands in his pockets. See, I told you. Roman trembled, smeared in his own blood and mud. He thought he could outplay the devil. But the little devil decided to outplay Lucifer, and paid for it. Nick stood in the darkness, looking at the woman he once called his wife. Ana Graves. His wife. His betrayer. She sat on the cold concrete floor, hands bound behind her back, her thin nightgown torn at the shoulder. Dirt, blood, and tears mixed on her face. But now, with her master lying in the damp earth, she looked at Nick differently. Not as a husband, not as the man she once loved, but as a master. For the first time in her life, she felt fear of him. Nick, her voice trembled. You aren't going to kill me, are you? He slowly crouched before her, looking directly into her widened eyes. Why not? She swallowed hard. I was foolish. I didn't understand. No, Anna. He smiled coldly. You understood. You made a choice. You sold yourself. He traced a finger down her cheek, and she shuddered. And since you love selling yourself so much, her eyes widened in fear. No. He slowly stood up. He'll play into that. She breathed rapidly, her chest heaving like a cornered animal. Please. You called him your master? Nick ran his hand through her hair, devoid of any tenderness. You belong to him? She closed her eyes, her body shaking with quiet sobs. Now you belong to me. She looked up, and at that moment, he saw her gaze change. Fear didn't vanish, but trepidation appeared. She no longer looked at him as a husband. She looked at him as a master. You're mine, Anna. He smiled. And now you will sell yourself, but only on my terms. She took a shuddering breath. Nick, what are you going to do with me? His fingers slid down her neck. I'm going to open up new horizons for you, dear. And for the first time in her life, she truly felt what it was to be subservient. Sophie trembled, her shoulders shaking from quiet sobs, her eyes wide and darting from her father to the chaos around her. Her entire body seemed frozen in shock, as if her brain refused to accept the reality into which she had suddenly plunged. Nick knelt before her slowly, making no sudden movements. It's over, he said quietly. Sophie shook her head, her breathing erratic. This isn't. Her voice broke. Dad, what have you done? Nick covered her hand with his, squeezing. I did what I had to. She pressed her lips together, tears streaming down. We aren't like this. We aren't murderers. Nick looked at her longingly, then slowly exhaled. Sometimes the world leaves us no choice. Sophie sobbed softly. Why? Why did all this happen to us? How? How do we get into this? Nick looked at the bloodied body, at the dark soil where the one who thought he controlled fates was buried. It didn't start with us, he said, returning his gaze to his daughter. It started with your mother. Sophie tensed, her face contorted with pain. Mom, do you want to know the truth? She nodded. Nick hesitated. He knew his words would be a blow to his daughter. She betrayed us, Sophie, deliberately, coldly, sold her family for pretty words, money, and power. His daughter recoiled, but remained silent. He felt something was off with her, right? Sophie looked away. Yes, she chose that man. But her voice trembled. Couldn't she have just left? Did she have to be a part of this? Nick touched her shoulder firmly, giving her a sense of warmth. In life, people often make choices. Some choose honor, others choose betrayal. Sophie swallowed, her lips quivering. And if I said I still love her? Nick looked into her eyes. I won't make you hate your mother. That's your choice. She bit her lip, then nodded, allowing her tears to flow. Nick embraced her, and Sophie, at last, relaxed, burying her face in his shoulder, allowing herself to release all the pain she had carried inside. It's over, he whispered again. Really? She asked hoarsely. He looked away. The dark sky, the roar of a helicopter. Somewhere in the distance, remnants of the past that weren't so easily erased remained. Almost. Kay waited by the helicopter, standing, arms crossed over his chest. Nick walked toward him, holding Sophie's hand. She looked devastated but held on. Kay looked at them, then exhaled quietly. You're alive. I always live a bit longer than my enemies wish. Kay smirked. Will you ever stop being such a thorn in their side? Nick shrugged. Isn't that what we're born for? Kay smiled, then looked at him seriously. Do you realize what you did today? Nick nodded. Yes. It's not just revenge. I know. It was war. I ended it. Kay shook his head. Are you sure? Nick looked at his daughter. She's safe. That's all that matters. Kay looked at him for a few seconds, then stepped forward. Deberían bastar. Graves. And you love me for it. Kay smirked, then embraced him tightly, slapping his back. It was more than a friendly hug. It was a gesture of understanding, of respect, of loyalty. Nick slowly exhaled. We'll take you home, old man, said Kay. You're buying the drinks. Only if you're paying for the food. Don't even think about it, bastard. They stepped onto the helicopter, and at that moment, Nick Graves closed the last chapter of his old life.